Alright, real quick, time for From the Waste Devlog number 4. I'm in a weird stage where I'm ping-pong balling between different projects, just so I can, not be bored out of my mind working on a really ambitious thing for a long period of time. But anyway, From the Waste Devlog number 4. I'm just going to replay through the whole game on camera because there's kind of a lot to talk about. So yeah, there's not going to be too much to talk about at the beginning of this, but Alright, yeah, essentially the intro is pretty much the same. Now this first room here, I did make some minor alterations. I moved this growth that would be here down to this part here, just so like if you're traveling back up through here to get to the gutter section of the prison, you don't get caught on that growth. And I didn't want to move him further up into that room because first enemy that actually moves, you kind of want it to be a bit easier. So giving the player that extra walking space is kind of a necessity. I might honestly remove the second growth and just have there be one in that room. Don't know. We'll see. Anyway, there's been kind of a significant alteration with Fink here, not in the way his fight works, but the fact that there's now a cutscene and the entrance to the room is now at the top instead of the bottom. I think that just made more sense with how the cutscene was positioned, but whatever. I could have adjusted the view, but nah, I'm bored. Anyway, yeah, the Fink fight is currently the only boss that hasn't been altered literally at all since the previous devlogs. He's pretty much the same, which he's going to remain the same unless Fink gets a second fight, which I think he will, honestly. The idea was that he was going to drop the shotgun in that second fight. I don't know where I'm going to put it in the game, but yeah, that is currently the idea with Fink here. But anyway, this tutorial fight with him isn't really going to change, like, at all. Considering, it's supposed to be the easiest boss in the game, and you want him to be killed revolver only. We'll talk about why the revolver only thing in a bit. But anyway, there's now cactuses in the desert. Woo, they exist now. They're in some rooms. They're not in all rooms, Anyway, Tailtaker cutscene, you guys know the deal with that. That's been in the game for a bit now. Going up to Tailtaker, I don't recall if I showed this off in the previous devlog. Both now have journal entries. Woo. This part of the entry is kind of phrased weird, but I think it's technically grammatically correct. It's just a bit confusing with the commas. Again, I don't remember if I mentioned this in the previous devlog. Pretty much every enemy in the game, except the Hunt and Growth, which are the weakest enemies in the game anyway, have been nerfed health-wise, and all of the bosses except Fink have been buffed health-wise. I'll talk about why that is in a minute. So, Clanker, not too much to say about him here, except death animation now. It's a variation of the classic Clanker. All limbs pop off, torso falls down. I think it's less satisfying than most of his death animations prior, but this is probably the easiest Clanker has ever been, so yeah, this is like the one of 2 times Clanker has been a low-level early game enemy, and the other time was Inferno, and the Inferno Clanker sprite was changed to be the same as that guy, so yeah, that iteration of the Clanker just kind of sucks donkey penis. Yep, the Freak now has a death animation too. He just kind of falls into the pool of acid. Woo. Alright, there's not too many cactuses. I'm slowly going to be adding some environmental stuff to each area, not too much. Not to the level the Greeds in the Waste remake had, if you saw footage of that, which you probably didn't, because I don't think I ever uploaded it publicly, but yeah. Anyway, we know there's a cactus with a face here, and the sewer entrance now is has sewer tiles. Ooh, you still can't go up there. I have drawn a couple sewer enemies and one sewer boss to go up there. I'm still trying to figure out how I want the sewer area to function and stuff like that. We'll see, but yeah, sewer area's up there. Ooh. Now, FRM still isn't finished. Everything up until from Tailtaker to here is pretty much done, except sound effects and stuff, but yeah, FRM's not done. I still need to give him his boss name, his icon, and his splash screen. He also has not been buffed. I have not changed FRM's health since the previous devlog. So I guess I forgot to mention him when I was talking about Finknut being buffed, but he's actually kind of been effectively nerfed since his enemies pretty much function as temporary HP, you know, where they block you. He's kind of been nerfed, where, you know, the enemies all have less health. Anyway, Elite Raiders now have a death animation. They both share the same death animation, just like they did back in Greeds in the Waste. And in Greeds in the Waste, their death animation was just a variation of the friggin' regular Raider death animation, which is what it is here, even though the regular Raiders don't exist anymore. I'm trying to get the Elite Raider off of FRM here. There we go. Anyway, FRM has a death animation now. There it is. He gets crushed by that guy. That guy is simply known as He Who Is the Big. Anyway, you go up, pick up the saw blade launcher. If you press space while you're on him, he says words. He Who Is the Big. I am the Big. That is correct. If you leave the room and re-enter, He Who Is the Big is gone. If you didn't pick up the saw blade, it'd still be there. Whatever. Now, God, giving FRM a death animation has kind of caused the game to, like, eat itself, I guess. It still thinks there's a boss present, so I'm going to have to fix that, but anyway. Resetting, play, whatever, not an issue, there's a reset button, and I still save the progress. This is the saw blade launcher. If you look in the top right, saw blade launcher has been changed significantly. The flesh hound head has also been altered. The other weapons, grenade, shotgun, and chain gun, have had no alterations, but that's simply because they aren't obtainable through normal means yet. So, yeah, the bosses that drop those weapons simply don't exist at this point. The grenade boss will be called Stankus. He is the stinky boy, but whatever. Okay, so the shot speed of the saw blade launcher. Before I talk about the changes I've made to this thing, I'm going to talk about why those changes happened. So before, the saw blade launcher, from a mathematical perspective, was just a better version of the revolver. They fired similar projectiles. The saw blade did 3 times the damage, and had a piercing kind of effect, pseudo-piercing, where if it killed an enemy upon hitting the enemy, it would keep going. If it didn't kill the enemy, the saw blade would break, right? So that effectively made it a better revolver, as its shot speed was less than 3 times that of the revolver, but its damage output was 3 times that. So the damage economy of the saw blade launcher was objectively greater than that of the revolver. However, because of how slow it was prior, it made it significantly more fun to use, at least in my opinion. So what did I do to change this? I decreased the reload speed of the revolver to the same, not revolver, of the saw blade launcher to the same as the revolver. This thing now shoots at the same rate the revolver does. I don't think its projectiles move at the same speed, but it shoots at the same speed the revolver does. It does the same amount of damage, and and the saws still have piercing. Now let's talk about this up here, this meter up here. You have 15 saw blades you can shoot before you have to refill. To refill your saw blades, you just have to touch a bed. Quite simple. Now, this makes the saw blade launcher objectively more effective than the revolver. Before the revolver, the damage economy of the saw blade launcher, sure, was greater than the revolver, but the revolver was just more fun to use, and you lost less if you missed. Which I'm pretty sure the the friggin' projectile. No, they pretty much travel at the same speed. I don't know what I'm talking about there, but anyway, saw blade launcher now is objectively better than revolver. Shoots at the same speed, 3 times the damage, but you have to be conscious of your resources. This does mean that this thing can just shred through bosses very quickly, doing 45 damage in less than 8 seconds. So there's that, I guess. But yeah, 15 shots only. Let's go down to Bane. I've upped Bane's health to 120. Before it was 75, but there's a reason for that. You can just eat through his health with the saw blade launcher and get rid of over half of his health bar before he God, I'm bad at English. You could get rid of over half of his health bar in less than 10 seconds. So that was kind of a thing I had to fix. So now he's at 120, which functionally is the most HP in the game. Raid Cruncher still has more, but functionally Bane has more because, you know, Raid Cruncher, weak point situation. Gutter used to have 80, which would put him at the most functionally, but I upped Gutter to 100 instead of 120, as Bane, at earliest, will be the player's 4th boss once the game's finished, and friggin' Gutter, at earliest, will be the game's 3rd boss. Therefore, Gravedigger has to have more health. Also, there's the chance with Gravedigger that you have the grenades going into this fight if you took the other route. And the other boss of the first boss of the sewer route, also, the game expects you to, not expects you, there's the chance you have the Fleshhound King head going into the fight. As you can see, I've changed the way the Fleshhound King head looks when it's on the ground. It now does that stupid snapping thing. Before it was just a static thing. I think this is funny. But anyway, let's talk about this weapon. 300 shots. I've upped its range by 25%, but 300 shots, and its meter's in the top right. The 2 unfortunate things about the meter that are just kind of a byproduct of things. Now, obviously I wanted the meter to look like the Fleshhound King head was firing. I had to use a different sprite for that simply because there wasn't an effective way to get it to look right while also not eating the hell out of the game's memory, or me manually making a 300 frame thing with these, right? The Game Maker draw tile thing didn't work for this, so yeah. This is the best bet. The other, without wasting the game's memory, which, considering GMS1 pathfinding and how finicky that is, with how it eats memory, wasn't really an option. And the second thing about it is, once the Fleshhound King head's ammo gets to a certain level, you won't actually be able to see how much ammo you have left. That's not really a huge deal. Once it gets to about there, that's not really a huge deal because you probably have like half a second left of firing anyway, and you know when you're out of ammo because his mouth closes, number 1, and number 2, you clearly stop firing. So, yeah. Also, I kind of like how it's an actual meter instead of just being a bunch of spraying projectiles. I mean, I guess I could use something like draw self, but nah. I haven't tested that, so number 1, I don't even know if that'd work. And number 2, yeah, no. I'm not gonna dick with it. I'm not gonna dick with it anymore. It's fine. Oh yeah, I forgot the friggin' Raiders and Elite Raiders swapped. I mean, not Raiders and Elite Raiders. Friggin' growths. Some of them swapped out for Elite Raiders, and others didn't. That's neat, I guess. Anyway, essentially the way the game works is now, the weapons are all better. You just have to kind of conserve which weapons you want to use at any given time, going from checkpoint to checkpoint. And because, you know, each weapon you get adds another meter that you have that can be fully filled, they're all better than the revolver, you get tangibly stronger every time you beat a boss and get a new weapon. if that boss drops a weapon, that is. You get tangibly stronger, because that's another meter to play around with. Right now I just have one. If I just beat FRM, I have one weapon. That's more powerful than the revolver that I can use for 15 shots. If you beat Gravedigger, you get the Fleshhound King head, which adds another one that's objectively stronger than the revolver that you can blow through. Beating Stankus will give you the grenades, which is another weapon that you can use more powerful than the revolver, etc. To compensate for this, later areas will have more rooms in between beds, rather than giving enemies more health, but whatever. Anyway, he was the biggest here. I am the big. He is the big, in fact. Going up to Telltaker here, friends. He who is the big has a journal entry. There it is. Foes. Clanker Breath, which is this version of the Clanker. Why they're called Clanker Breath is like it deals with kind of stupid Inferno lore stuff, which Inferno doesn't even exist anymore, so I don't know why I'm trying to reference that game. I wrote this entry this morning at like 6 a.m. It's 2 p.m. right now. I have no idea why I decided to reference Inferno with this stuff, but anyway, the previous Raider Scientist Mechanic Surgeon guy was Gogs. He designed the original Clankers. After his death in Inferno, which canonically doesn't exist anymore, again, I don't know why I'm referencing this, the new Raider Scientist Surgeon thingy guy is named Breather. Clanker Breathe is the Clanker iteration that was designed by that guy, which I'm now realizing does not make sense with Inferno lore either, considering the fact CK decided to use this sprite instead of the Clanker sprite that was created for that game. Thankfully, none of this mentions Gogs, Breather, or Inferno, so I don't have to change anything, but whatever. Anyway, Freak. There's Freak's entry. He now has an entry. Ooh. Fiend's flesh-ripping machine. There is his entry. He now has one. So that's neat, I guess. Those are all the entries currently in the game. The only entries not here are Gutter, which I think you saw in the previous video. He'd be here. And Knots has an entry, which goes there. The enemies in the other half of the desert currently do not have entries. Now I've changed the position of these growths a bit. I've altered the positions of some enemies up here. This area was kind of rushed a bit. So I went back and altered enemy positions a bit. By the way, hunters now have death animations. They're as mid as they've always been. So that's neat, I guess. Yeah, I went up and altered the enemy positions in some of these areas so that they weren't jank and you wouldn't get hit going back. So yeah. I'm now realizing Bubba Fathead is like the first new regular enemy in this entire game. Every other regular enemy in FTW is a redraw of another waste enemy. So Bubba Fathead is the first original of the game. So that's neat, I guess. The Ash is basically original though, as it looks pretty much nothing like its Greeds in the Waste counterpart. Anyway, yep, hunters have death animations. Bubba Fathead has a death animation, which I think his is funny, honestly. I think his is quite funny. But whatever. Anyway, now there's a cactus with a face, but it's a meanie face. Talking about Raid Cruncher here. So, with the modified saw blade launcher, effectively, Raid Cruncher, if you're shooting at his heart, had 25 hit points originally, which is not a lot. That's about as much health as a friggin' Clanker had in Hello Waste 1. So, to remedy this, I upped his health to 720, which, if you're shooting at the heart, is functionally 36. You can still one-cycle him with the saw blade launcher. It's just more difficult now. As in pixel perfect. Not pixel perfect, but you know what I mean. If I didn't go down there or hit every single one of those shots at the right time, I would not have made it, probably. Not pixel perfect, but for like the game's effective third boss at earliest, that timing's pretty tight. Not crazy tight, but you know. And then the Knots cutscene, you guys know that. Now, Knots actually kind of has a practical use now. Knots before essentially was just a bed that didn't save your progress, right? which kind of made him useless, because functionally he was a bed, it's just that you got punished more if you died after healing at Knots compared to a normal bed. Now Knots actually has a tangible use. From a level design standpoint, that is. He does not refill weapon ammo. So now there's actually a gameplay difference in going to Knots instead of of having a Knots there instead of a bed, other than just punishing the player more if they die. Now there's pretty much nothing to talk about here. Again, I upped friggin' Gutter's health a bit, but I did not change how that fight goes, like at all. And there's no other design changes in the prison, in the upper half of it. So, yeah. Pretty much everything I've shown off in the devlog so far is just kind of it. I guess I can show off a sewer enemy.